Peace, 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 peace. But I hope everyone here in peace. I hope everyone here as adults. If you a troll, you will be blocked. And like I say, I just, oh my goodness, boy, I tell you every time, I knew it was gonna start. Apologies, y'all. My phone get to ringing and buzzing. But apologies to everybody. But once again, as we talk about freedom and human rights and Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15, and House Joint Resolution and the religious rights of the indigenous people, so on and so forth. When we talk about the Dred Scott Law was never abolished, and it was illegal to be Negro, Black, and Color, or African American since the 1800s, and Negro, Black, and Color is all synonymous to slavery, civil mortars pertaining in the eyes of ethnicity. And I'm down with reparations, don't get me wrong. I'm down with reparations just like the next man. But when I speak from lawful perspective, Negro, Black, or Color, or African American is never, ever, 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 ever in my lifetime, in your lifetime, in our kids' lifetime, never gonna get no reparations. And I don't care how nobody feel about that. And we can huff and puff and blow smoke. We can hire all these attorneys, Ben Crump and all that, but Ben Crump know that that's a losing fight. Would he get paid? Of course. Because all attorneys, lawyers, whatever you want to call them, they're going to get paid regardless if they win or lose. But going into this, I know that he know that I know that it's a lose-lose situation. This is a fact. No matter how no one look at it, that's a key. That's an actual fact. And so when we speak about these things, I'll be like, well, in reality, what is a Negro? In reality, what is a Negro? I always ask that. When we talk about trivia, like a sardine, derived from Sardinia, an Italian island in the Mediterranean Sea. And the word sardine actually refers to many groups of small fish. The sprats, the pilchards, the Atlantic herring, mostly young herrings, primary fishes which make the area of food fish called sardines. Pending where they are caught, the fish are then denationalized, commercialized, advertised as South African sardines, Pacific sardines, and European sardines. You get the story. But when we talk about this, how does the Negro fall into this? As the great God did not create sardines nor place them in the sea, per se. The Creator did not create Negroes, Indians, Chicanos, blacks, white folks, Latinos, colored people, or African Americans, nor place them on the earth. And the many Moorish nationals, Moorish Americans in today's Western Hemisphere are a caucus of nations, tribes, countries of the ancient Moorish Empire of Northwest and Southwest shores of Africa. And it's no disrespect when I hear my religious brothers and sisters argue, I say, how can a Moor and a so-called Israelite, I'm not saying Hebrew Israelite or any biblical person argue when we talk about the descendants of Ham, when we talk about the tribe of Judah, lineage of David by blood. How can anyone get some disrespect out of the words that came out of my mouth? All members of the human family are indigenous to the Avid, of the earth, of divine origin. And the West Africans did not become Negro, black, and colored people until the so-called time of so-called slavery in the Americas and associated slave-breaking islands in the Atlantic. And as a paradigm, the sardines and the Negroes are evil brand names and labels placed upon deities captured in garbs of flesh, which would otherwise be autonomous in their true state and nature status. But tragically, brothers and sisters, whereas many seaside countries produce and export sardines from their nationalized fishing industries, the so-called acronym Negro, Black, and Colored people are made only where? Here in America. And it's no disrespect when I say, if you are an American, then you are a native of the land. When I tell people, I say, dude, a lot of the history books and a lot of the stuff, the record's not even right. I can go to the Royal Archives and show you a lot of the records not right from scholars, from European scholars that's been there all the time, showing you like this not true, this not true. You didn't come for that. That's not factual. I mean, you can read the One World Titarians by European scholars. I'll give you the book. I'll give you the ebook and read it for yourself. So we don't have to be arguing and saying, well, this is not true and this is not true. Okay, well, let's deal with the science and let's see what the scholars were saying and the cartographers were saying at that time, no matter what color they are. Let's see what the history is saying about these things. From scholarship, if we're going to deal with scholarship, because we just can't be dissing everything. Let's see what Bertrand Thomas said, what the Arab is. Y'all know who Bertrand Thomas is. He wrote a book called The Arab. He's told you what the ancient Arab is. Let's deal with Vladimir Dale's, a Russian scholar. He had a dictionary, told you what the ancient ARP is, not ARAB, what the ancient Arab is. So we don't have to have a argument over nothing if we're not going to be historical. We just have to say we want to introduce to that part of science, and we're being introduced to it. That's all. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong when I say, have you ever heard of the Wilmington White harlot? You know? So we're just to speak about this. Have you ever been to a lecture? And when I say, well, if you've never been to I think you should want to come to a lecture to learn. Because Noble Drew Ali is I done heard so many with the prophet and a whole bunch of U.S. Army generals on the cover. So I'm not here to argue with no one. I'm trying to tell my brothers, I said, if you study more science and you are more, I hope you study it the right way, not jumping with. And if you're historical, it's only one history. It's only one science. It's only one prophet. It's only one Moorish Science Temple. That's why I created a school for brothers and sisters to come learn. The Moorish Science Temple of America was created as a school. And you're supposed to teach your people your nationality and spirituality. Everything else is an expertise. You must be an expert in that, not someone that just read some goofy Black Laws dictionary, a whole bunch of terms. We don't even use that in the arena of law. So when I talk about the divine must come first, the divine must come first. It must. Everything else is uncivilized. Everything else is uncivilized. When we talk about, it's a European scholar that wrote a book called The Negro is a Beast. When I show you these things, but then when I show you other histories like what's his name? Not Godfrey. Well, Godfrey Higgins, he's one. And it's a book called The Analysis of Old Christian History. And they be telling you exactly what it is when you're a historian, when you're studying from the biased perspective. But in reality, what is a Negro? A Negro is an animal that has 4 legs. But what beast made? See, that's what they say the Negro is. Detached from the human family. It's a crime called denationalization. And the atrocity of man denationalizing another man ranks high on the scale of federal and international crimes of treason, genocide, ethnic cleansing. So when these goofballs on the internet say they can nationalize and denationalize you, well, that's treason. That's treason. That's genocide. Living evidence of this modern day evil began with so-called notices. When we talk about the 1774 colonial black code laws, y'all remember those? The laws contrived in the lodges of Masonry, York, Scottish Rite Orders, announced the New World, the Western world, the African gods of the Nile were dead, and the light of Egypt was what? Put out. It was extinguished. And in 1779, the laws were translated into the main constitutional body of law, which were to govern the world's newest autonomy. And I don't even have to state all in that, you know. The United States gained sovereignty from the founding fathers, who was mostly Albion, European, Tralodite, whatever you want to say, Masons. They were slaveholders. They proclaimed their profound world of property of the first order of business to show the serious intent of the dehumanizing and making of the Negro. George Washington and other Masonic farmers wrote the denationalization West Africans into the very first three-fifth clause of the Constitution of the United States. And everyone else was written in as property, especially women, Indians, not taxed, and the low maintenance, high profitable bull market Negro. And the only exclusion of this profane world was the only citizen of the United States, e.g., no disrespect, white males aged 21, with sound mind and body. And after the institution of slavery was abolished in 1865, the European brothers of a victorious North and conquered South manufactured the misnomer Negro, black, and color, whose names were now outlawed in Article 1 of the 13th Amendment under the assumable jurisdiction, appearing as persons, aka commercial property, and owned by Congress in a ratification of the 1864 14th Amendment. So when these Negroes be talking that 14th Amendment stuff, they just change the jurisdiction of slavery. I hope y'all heard what I just said. No matter how nobody want to take it. No matter how nobody want to take it. Yep. They were now outlawed in Article 1 of the 13th Amendment under the assumable jurisdiction, appearing as persons, commercial property, and owned by Congress in a ratification of the 1868 14th Amendment. Further evidence of the nationalization of the West African nationals, that the making of the Negro, black, and colored can be found upon their certificates of live birth. Everyone, all states certified bearing the so-called slave caste per se. And when I say you don't do a status correction, you correcting a mistake. When I talk about how to navigate, I tell people it's a way to do things, and the way you're doing things is wrong. I promise you this. This is not hard. The way as property, the misnomer Negro, black, and colored can annually generate $1 trillion consumer dollars and yet not own anything the citizens are bound to respect. And legally, property cannot have rights, or it may become equal to the greater than its owner. And since 1870, fee voting rights of the Negro have been granted and expired 5 times, including, remember, in July 2006, the disinclined granting by the merciful Bush administration, the via NAACP. Y'all remember that? So we can talk about things like, for instance, the ungodly making of the misnomer Negro, black, and colored. It's not only a sin, but also a crime, but they remain powerless when compared to the standard qualifications of all existing nations. Negroes, blacks, and today's self-proclaimed African Americans do not have one free national name, no religion, no national constitution, standards, principle, country, which is land, named after themselves, a national flag, a seal, an emblem, and no forefathers, no genealogy or prosperity to offer their begottens. And these family and nations' necessities are too numerous to remain absent of inquiries. Yet these questions must be answered by the have-nots, because the have use these requirements to preserve their freedom. You know that, right? When the U.S. abolished the institution of slavery, family, it also eradicated all slave labels and opened the door for a new nation to declare themselves. Legally, the word abolishment does not translate to freedom. So when you say they abolished slavery, okay, but that don't translate to freedom. Freedom and citizenship have been assumed by the Negro for nearly 1.5 centuries per se, during the time of when this was brought up, when these speakings was spoke of. And the slave governments do not have the power to free. It's on the people. That's why I tell people, you in the Constitution. True freedom must be attained by the displaced, the captured, or the imprisoned, and those who continue to cling to the names and principles that delude to slavery are alienated themselves from the family of nations and subjecting themselves to all the abuse and mistreatments the citizens cared to bestow upon them. When legal slavery ended, mental slavery began. And who are Moorish Americans? Moorish Americans are descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwest, southwest shores of Africa. The Moorish Empire, with its comity of kingdoms, nations, countries, tribes, and families, was in full effect during the entire African slave trade until 1908, From the Moorish Empire came all African nationals who were abducted, enslaved, and transported to the Americas and the adjoining islands. Because of the USA's indignant system of denationalization, those Moorish buried in the shallow grave of constitutional laws after the time when the history was given, so we'll say during that time, it was 140 years, are the only descendants of U.S. slave remaining without a proper status, known by name and number. And in this age of what we say Aquarius, or AKA the information age, the time has come for all men to proclaim their free national name in order to be recognized by the nationals of the earth. And the Moorish were and are the processors of the keys to civilization and the holders to peace on earth. So we have to understand this. We have to understand that Thomas Jefferson and other, no disrespect, European Freemasons who assist in the burial of the African God man, they all said one day the Negroes will rise from the dust. And this is true, but not as Negro black and colors under another color of law. When wisdom was obscured in ancient Kemet, the light of civilization went out of the world. Yet there is still much wisdom to be learned of a Maxima, a Kibalon, whatever you want to call it, and the first true and divine name of the present day, which we call Africa. This is so-called Negro has been forbidden to gain the consciousness of truth and self. Isn't it ironic when I talk to my Masonic brothers, when I say Haram Medif of Africa, the proverbial rejected cornerstone, displayed as the all-seeing eye, detached from the pyramid of nations and the original straw man used to pay the national debt? It's no disrespect. It's no disrespect when you understand the science, when you be like, it's another way to do things, yes, the right way. These lessons are to generate thought activity and are based upon the warning to a lot of brothers and sisters that's not operating right. Remember, the prophet said, if I could just get you to start to think, you would save yourself. If I can just get you to think, you can save yourself. Right? Think about it. I ask people, I say, if nothing no one should teach you should get you in trouble. What is the Negro? What is the black? We promulgating this black stuff. The great God never made anything or such being as Negroes, blacks, or colored people, and attached them to the human family. And for self-named African Americans who fancy themselves more intellectually, than their Negro look-alike, you got to be advised that you nothing but recycle slaves. No disrespect. None of them carry an EOP, a free national value, on the scale of proper person or true identity. And those who have ignorantly carried these names that were given to so-called slaves during the time of slavery and voluntarily dressed themselves under various Western Masonic, political, religious, or social titles can not only bear witness to this hundreds of years of consequences. And it's no disrespect to no one who made you. The great God made you. When I say Allah, I'm not talking about no foreign Islam. I'm not talking about that. The next question should naturally be, who made the misnomer Negro, black, and colored? And the answer should be those named them Negro, blacks, and colored people. That's who named them. That's who created them. Indeed, they are simply what? Man-made entities is what I'm telling my brothers and sisters. And the most difficult task to anyone is to convince a people that they are not what others say they are. And it's an ultimate impossibility to be yourself while being what others have designed you to be, especially when they themselves voluntarily and aggressively insist on being replicas of what the great status quo have labeled them according to these laws. Socially, politically, religiously, he or she cannot be themselves while being something or someone other than what? Him or herself. And outside of the world of procreation, anything made by man that is contingent upon the rate of atmosphere to sustain its life is a monster, is a beast, or chattel of its own making. Think about this. Shocking as it may be to a person that's listening to me at this very moment, there is an evil origin that secretly rests in history of today, the so-called African, the so-called African American, which is an oxymoron. Just like a sovereign citizen is an oxymoron. How you gonna be a sovereign and a citizen at the same time? That's some cap. And in the history of man being formed on this earth plane, the great God of the universe has never made a beast race, then attached that race to the human family. And the bearers of the word black are actually a people made in the image of the Creator. But what I'm saying, brothers and sisters, shortly after their live birth, they were what? Processed under various so-called state laws, wherein they were born or reside, and then certified exclusively to be made in America in the semblance of a people. And the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored from the very outset were designed to never be free national people in theory, principle, or standards of citizenship classification. Understand the science is what I'm saying. We don't have to make up nothing. When we talk about holy instructions on religion, the great God hath instituted laws for the government of the world, wonderfully varied them in all beings, and each by his nature conformed to his will. When we talk about our religion, all living things made are what? Created according to the design of what? Its nature. And it is the nature of a thing to be what? Its true self. It is the nature of a fish to swim, birds to fly, water to be wet, and in the nature of the mind to become what? What it thinks. Therefore, according to these natural laws, which govern all things created, the making of the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored is no exception. Lies and reduced to property. This is no disrespect. This is nothing new. It is simple color to be exempt from the status of property. And to the many that do not know these statements to be true and have more questions than solutions to the so-called Negro problem, this is for you. And for the few that know, but have sworn not to tell, the true manumission for you is also what I'm giving you. Because you know what I'm telling you is truthful. This is freedom. It's many great books, you know? But misnomer Negroes, well, we're trying to get these brothers out this shallow grave. It's many, you got the Quran, Torah, the Bible. They all have been around during the so-called African Mafa. Yet none has the power to restore nationality and the ancient creed of the lost and found tribes. Because if that's the case, we wouldn't be arguing over religion all day. Remember Ralph Ellison in that book referring to the American ex-slave entitled The Invisible Man? Ellison gave a vivid account of what it's like to exist, yet not be recognized because of a peerless status. Few people consider the fact an entire people can personify a status of non-existence. America's muffled question in her delusion, machination of a nation. Maya is the real appearing as unreal. Y'all know what I'm saying? The unreal made seem as real. And it's the everlasting seeming as short-lived. And that which is meant to appear as everlasting. And there is a nation within the jurisdiction of the United States that is pure Maya. You have to understand where we're going with the wisdom to be matter factual. All the stuff I said, like all this stuff need to be done with. Our prophet brought things, but just like the Dred Scott and many others made legal statuses before the courts. You know? And the authors, and a lot of the authors that promulgated these things didn't think you would study and read. When I ask people, what is it meant by the word black? According to science, it means death. Can a man be a Negro, black, or color, aka Ethiopian? No. Why? Because man is made in the image and the likeness of the great God, Allah, per se, with all its extremities, arm, leg, arm, head, a perfect penta. The key here is black is revealed as being a mere word. That's all it is. All words have meanings and are subject to definition and interpretation. And any grammar grade student will clearly show black as not being a color, however, virtually all applying the word black as an identification of themselves do not realize that they have long since been turned out as a perpetual straw man per se. And since the 60s, claim black people, while learning to accept the skin they are in, sing a slave mantra when they say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. You know that. Only an unnoticeable few have come to the realization it was not they who first named them black or more and blackie and finally black, but the very other ones enslaved them when they were African nationals. Just like in the 1599 Geneva, it calls you a blackamoor. It's describing the you of the Moor. They are too vain or ashamed to look at the black horse they've accepted to ride to nowhere, was never their own, alive and well. They'll never win the race. And for this reason alone, blacks will always be so-called slaves. No disrespect. Even if blacks were to conquer the other man, they would still be losers. Why? Because by becoming the enemies they once hated. That's why I tell people, you want the power to do that, you're going to lose. But to know this, you must obey their eyes to see the greatest weapon against the Western world order. Nothing hides the heart of a man from himself like vanity, because the ego is always a sturdy foe to fight. Always. But what does the law say about the Negro? It is legally impossible for the so-called Negro, black, or colored people to free themselves without the achievement of a good education in divine, national, and civil laws. So when you're on the internet playing, you listen to these jacklegs telling you to file some paperwork, you might as well stop, because they know they playing with you. I'm telling you they playing. Such needed learnings are not nearly as complicated as going to Harvard or Yale, because I already done that for you. Most people in the West do not realize the foundation of U.S. laws is lodged between European Latin and Greek languages, and the first Bible, what they like to say, which today's United Churches, governments, and state officers must swear upon, was written in Koine Greek. And none of the so-called European system of education are designed to free the misnomer Negro, black, and colored from its Western psyche of enslavement. No disrespect. And on a more personal note, the basis of all laws are more of a person's birthright that rests upon the two immutable pillars of status and jurisdiction. And I'm not saying how you hear these goofballs do the status and jurisdiction. That's not how that goes. So you have to look at that as well. And as long as you just go to school to get an A or a B, you will never learn these principles. You know? For instance, like when you say your status, or when you say the status of a person that may be melanated, the student or the seeker must learn the origin of the definition of the words. So you don't forget these words were property labels given to slaves by slave owners, then written into the 1779 United States Constitution under the classification of the 3/5 clause. Remember? And during that time, as the great Constitution of the USA was written, the misnomer Negro, black, and colored acronym were those who had been reduced from African nationals to chattel property by the people and for the people. And this made the slave term Negro, black, and colored legally branded upon the African descendants and lawfully enforced by all U.S. courts. And in 1857, the United States Supreme Court's infamous Dred Scott decision upheld the original denationalization intent of the slave marks, Negro, black, and colored, remember? And later in the 1868 Congressional 14th Amendment, the words all persons born still meeting commercial property and incorporating the original 3/5 clause written in the U.S. Constitution made the newly freed misnomer Negro, black, and colored believe he and she are citizens. But no. Truth is, there is no one who is able to make any property a citizen as long as it continues to self-claim the name of property and is still nationalized via ownership of another government. So this is how the trick bag with these Negroes on the internet get you. They tell you that you need to expatriate from the de facto government and join a crap. No, and that's how they get you, because they say these things. But if you're dealing with someone truthful, I done gave you all truth already. You don't get rid of no evidence. You have the right to do these things. I done broke everything down. So when you come to class, you'll be able to ask questions. You won't get caught up in truth and falsehood strangely mixed. This is what I be telling people. I promise you. The truth is, the definition of the words Negro, Black, and Colors has never been changed in the Webster's or the law dictionaries. Neither any of the three branches of the United States of America or the governments that have jointly enslaved the nationals of Northwest and Southwest shores of Africa, aka the native land. I'm saying that as a whole. So I hope people are catching just a little tittle. Just a little tittle. Just a little tittle. Because a lot of this stuff is not complex. You know? It's simple. Like the so-called black people seem to have everything that all other people have, except there is black. But since the word black basically means to be without life and the absence of light, it raises the question, what do black people really own? And the answer is already circumscribed with the true etymology of the word black. Just so any of the true common meanings of the adjective black, as in deaf, lifeless, or dead, then place it in front of any subject generally used in association with the so-called black people. And they will be surprised at the game that has been played on every day since 1652. Now let's apply the word black to its everyday assimilable use in the only country on earth that makes these people with black minds. Remember that the true etymology of the word black has always meant deaf. So true history bears witness. The idea of a Negro, a color, or a black person or people was never an African philosophy. History will further reflect it took scores of years to beat the black psyche into an isolated people until it became a living part of them. And the results were life itself then became the only filter through which the branding iron of black acceptance displayed only African survivors. And you can see this chattel slavery. The essence of the word chattel is cattle. Cattle farming of humans in America from its African known as slavery, chattel slavery, new to the nations of the earth. So when we talk about these things, we don't have to hide history and what happened in the world because it's too much history. It's too much history, y'all. We want to do things the right way. When I talk about subjugation and all these things, when I talk about like the 13th and the 14th Amendment, we have to talk in circles because that's the only way a person will get it. We'll have a clear understanding to be like, wait a minute, man, you being played. You being played. Most people are being played. Most people are being had. When you talk about the 14th Amendment, there's no need for the application of the 14th and the 15th Amendment for the salvation of our people. Remember when we examined the 1865 and the 1870 amendments, right? And have made the determination that the 14th and the 15th Amendment is the sneakiest document of re-enslavement to ever been written, because the 14th Amendment alone is so crippling and devastating until it later transformed every U.S. citizen from ignorant sugar cubes to corporate sheets known as what? Straw men. Within 60 years of the ratification. And the power of the South had been its slaves until losing the Civil War. Remember? It's a book by Tenzer. It's the Forgotten Cause of the Civil War. And on Amazon, that book costs a grip. I have all this stuff. I lectured in college. That's why I'm telling you, a person that's real, that's a 5%er, a person that's a talented 10th, that's hard as pure, is going to come back and give you truth. That's been through the fire, you know, and come back and be the people's champ, per se. Because that's how it's going to be. I'm going to always be here. I'm going to always be here. And the 1863 military strategy of the Emancipation Proclamation and the Negro Voters' Rights Amendment proved were powerless without its slaves. And the 14th and the 15th Amendment alone brought the North and South in unit, placing the Southerners, who were at that time without power. And since the Civil War was primarily fought between one brother in blue and the other in gray, the 14th Amendment was actually a legal settlement of an agreed order, which took slavery from the gray dispensation and spread it into every state throughout the United States of the Blue Republic, remember? This was the only way both of the so-called brothers could settle the long-standing grievances about the power of owning and sustaining slaves in America. You got to understand that the founding fathers and their prosperity were and are frantically serious about the so-called slaves, so much that they fought their mother country and then each other just to keep their precious human chattel. Y'all know this, right? Research the history of the honorable president of the mighty Sox nation, Chief Sitting Bull, 1834 to 1893, was not only Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer's worst daymare, Little Bighorn, in 1876, but he also knew well the nature, no disrespect, of the European Masons in positions of power. The chief said, and I quote, "The cool words of the pale-face, spoken in darkness, always melt in the sunlight of his axe. How true, how true. And nowhere is the Masonic esoteric language more vividly demonstrated than in the 14th Amendment, written expressly for the ex-slaves. The Soxes and other indigenous people of America have and are experiencing the terrible whiplash effect of many broken treaties. Rarely do many people of the United States realize the Congressional 13th Amendment was also a manumission treaty with the African descents of former slaves. This document not only freed the slaves, but also simultaneously created a second new nation of people. And the Treaty of Freedom was broken within 3 years of its ratification by the covert and needless what? 14th Amendment. Also living in the same sunlight of European words, the so-called Negro, colored, and black people being backlash from the 1868 14th Amendment still believe this congressional act made them citizens of the United States. It's really heartbreaking when most people discover that it's a divine, natural, and lawful impossibility to make a denationalized person, aka property, into a citizen of a free national government. A people are only free when they are true to themselves, pure, clean, and independent. Y'all know this is facts. And it is of supreme importance for the student or anyone listening to me to identify the esoteric and the esoteric master words when I say persons and alien, particularly as they are used in the Reconstruction Amendments and in the parent body of the U.S. Constitution, because these words are soaked in the Masonic Maya of European male superiority and profane world of Africans, women, handicapped, children, and the elderly. They have the appearance of freedom, but have a deceptive core of subjugation and slavery. And if the misnomer nickel, black, and colored really wants to see what these laws say of them, they must understand their language when they are called persons and aliens, or they can simply rationalize the frivolous possibility of what? You know, the same constitutional master of slaves. These years would suddenly love them so much as to free them and to recognize them as equal to themselves as citizens. But is this likely from anybody that subjugated you? Do you think so? No. It's backed by a nearly century of non-support by the so-called laws until the Little Rock Nine in 1868 to 1957. During the 89 year, during that time, there were 3,882 recorded lynchings. In 1921, mass bombings of Tulsa, Oklahoma, millions of this Jim Crow segregation. So the 14th Amendment clearly states that, and I quote, all persons, now here we go with their word persons, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, are citizens of the United States and of their state wherein they reside. But the italicized words are very consequential to understanding the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Watch this. It goes on to read, in addition to no legal abridgment of these privileges or immunities of the citizens, nor shall any state deprive a person of life, liberty, property, or equal protection of the laws. And that's where Charles A. Wiseman, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. I done broke that down a plethora of times to show you things when these people that don't know how to read. I asked the dude call himself a sheik. I said, do you know how to read contracts? No. I said, so you don't even know the language that you out here teaching people. This is what's happening. We're dealing with court jesters, man. But the opening clause is in fact an ex post facto reenactment of the Negro and congressional deed of ownership of all ex-slaves, aka persons. And these laws were already written and guaranteed to U.S. citizens, right, as rights, earlier in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Read it for yourself. So why was it necessary for these rights to appear as privileges again in its 14th Amendment? You ain't never asked yourself that? Well, here we go. Simple. To make provisions for millions of free slaves that were not included in the Constitution, designed by the people and for the people, that was endowed by their creator. But unfortunately, history showed that the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored, those slaves, was and is endowed by his owner. And that is the duty of all creations to endow their creation. This also reveals that blacks as an as an American-made product exclusively, certified and marked only here in America. You see, the owner of all misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored people was and will always be the exclusive maker of Negroes. All creators are the true owners of their creations. And God never made any black people. And during the period of physical slavery, it was understood the slave was the property of the slave master, endowed with his name, mark, and provisions. And the 14th Amendment merely changed and legalized the language to the color, the institution of psychohistory, servitude, into the assumed sensory that it is today. And it now reads, all persons born. This clause was made to symbolize the nationalization of former slaves into citizens, yet without the free national descent name of their forefathers and their own true nationality, then by divine and natural law, they are still slaves and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And this is just law, like you don't have to overthrow nothing. This is what I'm telling people, the religious laws trump everything. Because the actual word person, as used in the 14th Amendment, is a masterful work of deception, and it's fooled millions of the best legal minds in modern American history. Watch this. Those few that do know will not tell because they were sworn to secrecy prior to receiving the information. I'm guarantee you, remember, all three of the Reconstruction Amendments ratified by Congress between 1865 and 70 were written exclusively about the slaves and ex-slaves. So the most damning by far is the 14th Amendment. Here, the word persons is always referring to the ex-slaves. It's a word held to protect the civil rights of the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored, but was broadened by the Supreme Court to include corporations, other properties, and businesses under its Equal Protection Clause. This word is today as much as the 3/5 formula in the basic U.S. Constitution, which calls too bright of a light in the letter of the law. And through the Constitution family, the word person, as applied to the misnomer African Americans, or whatever misnomer they choose, is still equivalent with the same individual and corporate property as always. So what I'm saying, y'all, to wrap it up, the 14th Amendment terminology, person, and the word property, they are synonymous, meaning they mean the same. They can be interchanged. The Negro reference to in the unchanged 1779 U.S. Constitution as 3/5 is the same. What? Property, referred to as person, in its 1868 14th Amendment. And that was 89 years later during that time. See? And again, proving the corporate United States of America, with all respect, with the exceptions of 3 years from 1865 to 1868, has never been without what? Its slaves. And that's not nothing biased, that's just facts. That's why I'll tell you today, I don't care what nobody's saying, what they promulgate. Negroes today, today's African Americans will never have true rights because the misnomer of Negro, Black, and Colored, the acronym is denationalized human property, and they were never designed to have rights. As labeled property, the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored can never have true rights because all rights are contingent upon what? Universal, natural, and or civil laws. And before there can be rights, there must first be laws from which rights derive their strength. And since the Negro does not have a constitution or laws of autonomy from which to govern itself, he or she cannot have lawful rights. And this is why that Dred Scott decision of 1857 stated, the Negro has no rights that the true citizens are bound to respect. The divine and civil laws was ratified in the 14th Amendment under the word person and sealed in its section 4, which states in essence that, I quote, Negroes, persons, whether free or slave, have no rights to compensation or reparations. So when these Freemasons be lying, if you were free or slave, you lying. Gave you law. So anybody coming with that stuff, you should be like, man, you cap. You cap. The 14th Amendment under the word person and sealed in its section 4, which states in essence that Negroes, aka persons, whether free or slave, have no rights to compensation. So when you talk about some Black Lives Matter and you finna sue for reparations, you're not getting no compensation or reparations. And like I told you, I'm down for reparations just like as any man. But still, this stately restitution is only reserved for constituted governments for what? Atrocities imposed against what? Another recognized nation. Research what I'm telling you. Tribe and or family bearing the same free national name. And by design, the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored is neither of these. So to avoid paying so-called reparations to slaves and descendants of ex-slaves is the main reason for the laws or the so-called Congress of the United States writing Section 4 into the so-called de facto 14th Amendment recycle ban of misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored slaves, aka persons, aka identifications. And this amendment is nothing short of a title of ownership and assumable jurisdiction of the free nation of people brought forth by Congress, right? And what amendment? The 13th Amendment, when you have a clear understanding of civics and laws. And this is a schoolmaster. I ain't even dealing with high civics. I'm dealing with a schoolmaster still. I'm not even in advanced civics. I can go way deeper. First, the misnomer Negro, Black, and Colored must be free as a people bearing one free national name. Then and only then will they be able to claim rights, which will draw its powers from their own constitution. You know? Hold on. I got you. Until the laws are adhered to, the misnomer Negro will remain as chattel and without rights, and they can only function under granted privileges, as demonstrated shamelessly with the 15th Amendment. Remember that 15th voting privilege amendment? It's been the existing condition since the 3/5 clause of 1779 when you research this stuff. Because when you deal with graduate lawyers of the ABA exam, when explaining how the same slave labels of Negro, Black, and colored that lawfully began in 1779 are still certified as state-owned property today, all this time later. All this time later. And there is not a rightful law on earth that can make a citizen from a mold design to produce the shapes of property, and African Americans, etc., being another misnomer, is the egg slot of slave labels and exclusively made in America. And this is why privileges granted to property should never be misconstrued as being the same as true rights earned by citizens of a free national government. I hope y'all really understanding what I'm saying. Don't get caught up with these people in the Black Law Dictionary and then they try to mix a little bit. It's cap. The last of the Reconstruction Amendment results from the Great Right of Suffrage of 1870. The amendment gave guaranteed voting powers to the free male Negro slave, but it was not because America so loved her only slave. It gave them the right to vote, and all other citizens. Quite contrary. But you got to remember, after the assassination of President Lincoln, the South began pouring representative money, influential filibusters, lobbyists into Washington with the intent to remain dominion in the South and reinstitute slavery. Remember, the Union staged the nation's first voter registration drive. Remember, in the most southern states, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, the ex-slaves, they greatly outnumbered the masters. So the 15th Amendment was created to give them power to vote, even though 98% of them couldn't read. So the Negro weight of the political South was used against itself, as these Trojan votes restored sovereign powers to the United Union states. And in short, property was used to defend itself. Are y'all following me? Citizens of the U.S. were guaranteed the right to vote in the very first article of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1. And therefore, the 15th Amendment was purely for the purpose of pacifying a segment of civilian populace for a time. And this is why the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment are all prompted by government to quell some form of civil unrest. And this form of government tactic, it ain't new. Due to the instability of the public, especially in a culturally diverse country like here in the States, granted privileges are a necessary deterrent to civil revolts by the hoi polloi. And in historical retrospect, remember, Rome crucified Yahshua according to their laws, not because he was guilty, but because Caiaphas of the Jewish Sanhedrin had threatened massive destruction to the city and Pilate's palace if their demands were not met. So we know this. We know this. It's a lot that can be said. Hold on, y'all. Yes. I'm talking. What's up? Okay, yeah, they already came. Yeah. Okay, like. Yeah, I knew that was gonna be blowing me up. I'll do it in a minute. I'll do it in a minute. But we got to know this. I introduced you to all that, but that shallow grave of Haram Abiff, when we talk, it's no secret of nothing. And I'm able to talk freely with this. Like since I've been in Arizona, man, I have no problem with no different nationalities. My professors were Scottish Rite Masons. They know about Noble Drew Ali. I know Scottish Rite Masons did a whole lecture giving homage to Noble Drew Ali on his 135th birthday, a European Mason. Like, what is people talking about? And Noble Ali didn't plagiarize the Morris Quran from no European Eliseus Levi. Eliseus Levi was nothing but a transcriber. Do you know what a transcriber is? So it's cap. Even Adam Blavatsky, all of them, they'll tell you where they got the science from Moors, from Sufis. These is facts. The research has already been done. The Theosophical Research Society, man, I already done lectures on that a plethora of times, over and over and over. The wisdom is there, but we let brothers and sisters that gravitate to a certain religion to say their figure is better than, because I don't think people are really historical. I don't think people really have an idea. Majority of our historical figures was under a certain, they were. That's why we can't be afraid of the signs and the symbols and the committed craft if we're dealing with people that's right. Because all scholars are going to tell you it's your science. From Gerald Massey, from Albert Churchward, Signs and Symbols of the Primordial Man. They're going to tell you, why are you afraid of your science? I mean, and this is all I tell people, when you're dealing with the right ones, let all the rest go sit down. Because it's not teaching nothing. When I teach systematically, Saturday and Sunday during class, to speak truth and to speak regular things that may be the average person that's intrigued, or if you're more, you'll be like, didn't know that, or I thought I was going to do this, and blah, they split. But I try to bring people to the storehouse for you can see what operation is really like, for you can see a different type of more, because we are not the same. We are not out of prison. We are not trying to overthrow the government with all that scam. That's not more science. I'm an educator. You know, I'm a behavioral health therapist. You know, I'm a divine minister. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I'm for men and all different. So like I said, a clean glass, but it's a right way to do things. And so that's what I want to let my brothers and sisters know. It's a right way to do things. I just wanted to give that little bit of build. Ask people. Ask some questions, long as it's pertaining to the topic, long as it's pertaining to some of the things that you might want answered. But I promise you, no one